Some days you think you know a person, and it turns out you don't know them at all. Sam, you broke my heart. Well, it is Wednesday, and we are wizards, and regardless, we are putting our runes on the door. Channeling in from the Quantum Downs, this is Dotta.
And the bear snake. How we doing?
Oh, uh, not great, but we're here.
Damn,
Yeah.
damn, Sam. What's up with Sam? I need to get him in a room and have a little talk.
We've got Matazuki up on stage. Hello. We've got Jitsi.
Hello.
So Alf today, unfortunately, is not feeling well. There's a lot of contagion going around today, both physical, financial, and mental. So yeah, Alf's not feeling too well. I'm actually starting to feel a little under the weather myself. Mrs. Dota has a fever, and it's just like going around, man. But we're here today. We're excited to talk about, well, everything wizards. The Halloween event. We closed the Nightmare Imp's door today. So the final stats on that were we had 16,815 boxes minted. And out of those, 10,052 have been opened already. And so that leaves 6,763 unopened right now. So pretty great, pretty great. I think that the original kind of max cap that we'd allocated for that collection was like 22,000. And so that's really fun that it came in, 4 or 5,000 kind of under that. I like keeping things rarer, and that's super fun. So the door is closed for now, but the box opening, will stay up until the last box is minted. So that's basically forever. And then we've got a bunch. Magic Machine. We probably have like 100 boxes. So I won't be surprised. We'll keep some, but we'll probably give some away in contests. I know the Dow has some they want to give away in contests too. So
Yeah. Actually, I was gonna say we actually got 227 boxes secured by the Dow, so we will
Tons.
definitely be giving those away. We'll keep them completely shut, so that way it's nice surprise for anybody who gets them. But yep, we have those. We'll be looking into future contests to give those away when we can.
There's such a fun thing to give away, right? Like, I mean, giving a wizard is like it's pretty significant. Warriors are to a certain degree too, but like those boxes are just like a nice treat to be able to use for certain things. So I'm excited we have so many to kind of like give away to people as they come into the community.
this morning,
Yeah,
this morning I finally got around to like minting mine, and I knocked with 20 warriors, and I got 15 tricks and 5 trees, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, can the devs do something? Ugh.
You
it's
coded,
good.
you
It's
coded
new.
yourself. You coded yourself out of some boxes,
I
brother.
wondered if it was a bug or not, but no, it was just bad luck.
Just a day.
Had anybody found the Dota in the Nightmare Imp map? I looked everywhere. I spent like 2 hours clicking everything I could. I learned how to summon Toru, but I did not know how to bring Dota out.
Yeah, so I don't mind telling you, Dota is above the door. So what you basically had to do is drag your screen so that way it was like very tall, and then you could see it up there. So yeah, we've actually talked quite a lot about just how fun it was to like walk around with your characters, right? Even my kids too, like straight away. They don't hear us like pitch it every week on Wizard Wednesday, and they like open it up and they're like, "Oh, this is fun! Like I get to like be my wizard. This is amazing." So I think we're gonna put up, at least a way that you can kind of walk around as your wizards, because like it's so fun, and then we'll build more on that as we go.
Yeah, I knocked on the door with a bunch of my warriors, and I think I did fairly well. I definitely have a bunch of boxes squirreled away, and I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. I guess I'm just gonna hang out with them and just stare at them.
Yeah, I can't open it. I like to savor it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we had really good success with kind of like the partner communities, right? So 10KTF, Moonbirds, Cool Cats, CloneX, they all maxed out the number of like boxes and tricks, and then Azuki, Bored Apes, Doodles, Loot, they all did like more than half. So it was really, really good. I think there's like many hundreds of folks who ended up with like treat boxes who aren't holding like any of the character tokens yet. And so, I think it's a good opportunity that they at least like know about the project. They kind of like see the stuff that we do. So I'm excited to kind of like see people come into the cult. I know that like it's been great actually. I'm in like other alpha channels or other like just discords, and it's fun to see them like sharing about our project there. So it was really really fun to take over Twitter for the day, and I was happy about that.
Yeah, one of the things, because I ended up running point on like sort of trying to pull in these partner communities, and I was really pleasantly surprised by some of the discords that I jumped into, and I may or may not have bought a doodle to take down Jitsi because we have
Doodle
a
Maxi.
lifelong bet.
I hope you enjoy putt putt.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be great. I'm planning on winning putt putt. I'm not even sure if it's a competition, but I will figure out how to win. But I regress. Speaking of doodles, like the community was just so welcoming, even before I purchased the doodle, and so it's just nice to see these islands of communities that actually are what feels like are there for the right reasons, and we have our little camp, and we love it so much, and it's good to know that there's other people out there doing the thing, and sort of feeling like they're a part of something. So it was
Fun day.
it was definitely a unexpected plus jumping in.
Yeah. I feel like given the market conditions we're going into, we're going to see a lot more of like communities kind of like building together and like wanting to integrate more together. For to weather out how long this is. So I think that's a really good move on our part to kind of like initiate that. I think it gets our foot in the door, and especially like later when we do like airdrops to these communities too. I think that just showing that kind of good faith and showing that like we're all here together, we're all kind of like building into space together, kind of solidifies that. I think people remember that in the long term. I think that they'll think back to like the fun experience that they had, like just jumping into like our map and getting a treat just for free, just for being in the space with us, And I think that that'll really, if it doesn't touch them now, I think that later on they'll really appreciate it at some point, and will be on their minds.
Yeah,
I agree.
And there's going to be more of that coming, especially with this sort of crypto board game that will be coming out imminently. There's a lot of this collaboration at the ethos of it, and we have some really fun ways of sort of getting in these other these other NFT maxis and communities that like are similar to us. And I think I rambled about it last week, but I'll just do it again real fast. I think whenever you have sort of like these types of creator economies, and I do consider whether you like that title or not, I do see these communities as people who are creating within their own little ecosystems. You see that collaboration is key between projects. What you were just talking about, Matt Al, and I think this is a perfect time to be starting to do that, and I feel like it's just great timing that we did the Halloween thing, and these other sort of events coming up where we can pull together with other people and do our thing.
Well, there's something to add to that too, like that I feel like I've been experiencing it myself, and I'm so all in Wizards. I think everyone kind of knows that to a certain degree, and I hope so. But like during the bear and everything else, I really know that there's tons of communities out there that we connect with, and that we just have to go have conversations with them, right? And so, and finding those, and there's so many small communities, big communities. Like this space is massive, right? And I find myself like buying into like smaller projects to go have conversations in the gaming sector specifically, just because it's so small right now, but it's so important to go have those combos so that we can collab, we can build and grow our ecosystems to like weave in together later on, right? So, and it's super fun. I really enjoy it.
And I think people who weren't open to doing that and they were so heads down on their own projects, I think everybody's picking their heads up a little bit and looking around and see
Right.
who's still here. And so I think there's more of an impetus to do that, which I think will ultimately be really, really great in the long run.
Completely agree.
Yep. Some updates on a few other things with Halloween. For the scroll redemption. So I think I mentioned this last week. We're working on basically the UI and all the like tooling to redeem it. I basically made an oversight insofar as I thought that what we were just going to do is take the scrolls and set up a pool in SudoSwap, like they did for Baron Court. So where you can like deposit a token and then get another like random token out. So what I failed to realize is that SudoSwap doesn't have a pool that lets you convert from 1155s, which is what the scrolls are, into ERC 721s, which is perfectly fine, makes sense. But we basically have to build one. And so Niski, shout out to Niski, is building a pool where we will deposit, wizards, warriors, ponies, and then if you have a scroll, you will be able to come to a page on our site, and then you'll be able to pick the one that you want, and exchange for that. So there is a bit of like first come, first serve insofar as it's the one that you want. But yeah, that should be fun. I can see us using that for other things too. I think we're actually going to do it so that like you actually deposit the scroll, and then like that way we can even keep it and like give it out for other from time to time, for example, like sometimes we make a deal. We're like, oh, we want this person to work with us, and so they like want a wizard or something, and so maybe we end up giving them a scroll so that way they can pick, and we don't have to like log into the multi-sig or something. But then at the same time, we might use it, for example, for contests where someone gets a scroll and then they can kind of like choose to trade it in or whatever. So all I'm saying is, yeah, those scrolls might get recycled, but we'll be the ones kind of like donating or whatever you want to call it, like supplying the tokens to the scrolls. But that said, it's going to take just a little bit of time. We were hoping to have it by the end of this week. There's just a few more pieces than I anticipated. It might actually be next week, but we're working on that. Another correction that I will actually post this in announcements is for the gold nugget. So I misunderstood along the way, and I think that I posted in announcements. I said, "Oh, the gold nugget will have when you forge a weapon with your warrior with the gold nugget." I said, "Oh, you'll have an animation, but no spell." And then everyone's DMing me like, "Well, if there's no spell, then what animation is there?" And I was like, "Oh, the gold weapon is animated." And then Cosmo was like, "No, it's not." And Elf is like, "No, it's not." So there's no animation when you guild your warrior weapon using the golden nugget. You basically have the golden weapon, but the animation was always on the spell, which is like kind of like the background more or less. And so yeah, so there's no spell attached to the gold nuggets. Still very valuable, but I think that the locks will always kind of be a little bit that have that nice edge on top of it. So I'll announce that before we open up being able to forge your nuggets for weapons, just so that way there's like no confusion there.
Dotta, can we talk about the 3D models? Because I'm bursting at the seams.
100%. So, okay. So
can we pin the tweet? Can we pin the tweet at the top?
Yeah, pin the tweet. Yeah, and then okay, the one who rings just shared a URL that was like very unassuming. I think the URL says ephemeral beignet, which you would not know that is a little demo for everyone listening in to check out the 3D models on your own computer. So the GIF that you see on Twitter, it looks cool, but like seeing it on your own computer, like blown up, where you can like drag around, is so much better. It looks so amazing. When you click on this link, one of the things you should do is like see what it says little like floor. Click on like Wiz Staff, and then click on Idle Animation, and then you should be able to see the animation kind of play. So, well, what did you want to add to that, Bear? So I think one is just like check it out. This looks amazing. Like the shininess on like the wizard's cloak and the armor just looks incredible. The noise on the cloak. I love the look and feel of these characters. Like the
Completely
wizard's
agree.
face. It looks like something out of like Spider-Verse or Arcane or something. And so, well, I think they look so good. I love it. I'm
People are
so
comparing
excited.
it to Wind Waker too. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was Orbis that mentioned Wind Waker. And when you look at this, and we've had conversations too, to where it's like, it looks simple, but so complex at the same time, but also very unique, right? And that's like one thing that I brought up in conversation was like, these look so unique. And like, when people look at these, they're going to remember they're associated with not just like epic fantasy, but like like the wizards, right? And so that's like super strong. I don't know. I'm looking at it now in this link that you all sent out, and it just looks so good. It looks so good.
Yeah, there's a visual language to it, and I think, yeah, I mean, for us, and Jitsi is really doing a lot of work on this front. Also, is we're talking to a bunch of metaverses games, whatever you want to call them, that are in 3D, that will be able to implement these characters. And I think because we did go through a whole entire cycle and actually created 3D characters for all the wizards, and then we ended up not liking them. Um, I think what we're planning on doing is rolling these out as they come, and so we have these two characters. They're fully designed, obviously fully rigged, and so we want to start roll. We want to give those out now, and then I know that people had submitted to have their wizards sort of as a priority, like they really people who whether or not they know how to use 3D building tools or what have you, they submitted, and so there's about 20 to 25 that will roll out fully rigged and ready to go before the holiday hits. And then we're just going to keep rolling them out. And the team has been doing so much work behind the scenes where I think it'll just go faster and faster and faster. So just excited to get those out there and have people start playing with them. I think, we talk about all the time 3D being a big part of the future of this project and this IP. So I'm just excited. I have a very simple brain, and I get excited by pretty pictures that move, especially with 3D. So I'm stoked to see what we have, and we have some really also just like really big partner conversations happening around them as well. So just so excited, and great job to the team as always. I guess I'm gonna have to learn Blender.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and we'll be able to put these in games too, which is fun. It's just like, yeah, endless possibilities. They're like, I'm so excited to have these. I got like super into a another little project this week that was that had 3D models. I'm sure I was like tweeting about it. It's called Tickle Beach, not financial advice. I just thought it was cute because they like put 3D models on chain, and it's just like so fun to have. Pixel art is great because anyone can contribute, right? Like, my 8-year-old can do a pixel art animation and make changes with it. But at the same time, the changes that you make are pixel by pixel. And so it's like very kind of like detail oriented and like very like painstaking. And so, of course, like one of the great things about 3D models is just like how you can set them in such a variety of situations in any sort of angle. And then like, you can import animations and it's all just sort of like it's a lot like well, it's software really, right? Like instead of just sort of like having something that's fixed like a piece of pixel art, you basically have software representing the shapes. And so yeah, it's going to be just really prolific year as we start rolling these out.
Yeah.
And
I think
go ahead, Meta.
yeah, I was gonna say like also another use case that I kind of thought of at the spot for these. I've been messing around with kind of like Stable Diffusion the past like few weeks ago. Every now and then when I have free time, it's really cool. I'm still like learning the ropes on it, but I think one use case for these that would be pretty cool is people can like model. They can like frame their like wizard or their warrior or, like a specific pose or whatever, or like maybe put like a background on it, and then they can use like the image to image like feature in Stable Diffusion to kind of like render that out into like a style that they want, and then they would be able to get like a pretty nice like illustration of like what they want of their wizard in a specific pose doing something in like a
Cool.
specific style that they may want, and then they can always use that as like they can like modify that as wherever they want. But I think that works really well for even just making like your own, just like spilling out, like if you do like a picture like illustrations for like your lore or something like that, you can just like
Definitely.
pose out your wizard. You can do it in 3D model, but you can also like stylize it like that if you use like AI to use image to image for it.
Well, and a lot of studios have been using like Unreal for like real time rendering of like videos. So, for example, you could imagine we could set up some infrastructure so that you can like tell stories with these 3D models, or that just people who are good at those kinds of tools can create animations that are like super high end, because now you have the characters kind of worked out. I mean, we'll have to do some work to kind of rig the faces. These characters don't have rigged faces yet, but still, there's so many opportunities, and it's just really fun to see the characters come to life.
Yeah, check out the Secret Tower. The one who rings just posted. He's been doing his thing in the background, playing with these models, and it's really cool.
Who made that three? Who made that Secret Tower model?
I don't know.
Where did that even
actually.
come from?
I think, did artists come up with that? One who rings needs to tell us. I've seen him use this model before, so it's somewhere within his files.
Hey, one who rings, Waz, why don't you come up here and talk?
Yeah, exactly. I messaged him earlier today. I was like, "Hey, Elf's not coming on. Do you want to like come in?" He's like, "No, I don't."
He actually just rung a bell and stopped
Yeah.
talking.
So good, so good. Well, let's see. So, some other stuff to talk about would be that I wanted to cover is we have some questions about the land sale, the quote unquote settlers. Um, the we could talk. I don't know if everyone's sick of talking about royalties. I've been tweeting about royalties like all week, but that's really been eclipsed by, of course, this sort of FTX collapse, which we could talk a little bit about that too. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about the game. So I don't know. I'll just dive in. So one, Warder asked a question about the land sale, and he said, "I know land is waiting on market conditions, but what conditions exactly? And what if today is a sign of what's to come for the next year?" I mean, I hope that today is not. We don't have today every day for the next year. That just sounds awful.
Well,
Like
is
I'm.
there anyone left? Is there anyone left
Yeah,
to go down?
exactly. Yeah. I don't. In terms of this whole thing, I like. So it help. We start to think quite a lot around like, well, what does it mean for the future, right? And um, we have like a lot of money in USDC. So I've shared our Gnosis safe before in the Discord. Feel free to take a look at it. I think for us as like a team, it doesn't. How to say this? Well, one is like my heart really goes out to everyone listening, and especially those affected directly, where like you lose the money that you have in FTX. I can't even like imagine. I know this well. I mean, I've had it happen before, but not to that degree. And so our heart just goes out to people who've been affected by it, and then of course we've all been affected by it by just like losses in the market. And so I think like, yeah, I just have a lot of sympathy. I know it's like really painful for a lot of people. I think that though for us as like a company and what it means for sort of Magic Machine and Wizards is we've been in stables since Warriors. Like I think I decided a long time ago is that like Magic Machine is like in the business of like creating and like creating Forgotten Runes, and not in the business of kind of like trying to eke out that extra high yield or even really trading ETH. Like we have some ETH, but it's like not a meaningful portion of kind of our like holdings. So yeah, so I think for us in that sense, it doesn't kind of change anything, right? We have like all of the money we need to keep going, all of the money we need to just keep building, working on these models, games, like everything that we said that we were going to do before. It doesn't really change any of that. I think that actually I'm. Is somebody eating, or I think you're like eating or something. I think that for me, what's on my mind even more is kind of like the market sentiment towards like royalty free marketplaces. But even that, I feel like you know the last word hasn't been kind of said there. We're talking about programmable money here, and so I think that there's still a lot of options left on the table for like creators to make money on kind of uh, let's say the velocity of their tokens, for example. So all that to say, when we talk about Warder's question, to circle back, right? It's like, well, what conditions are we waiting for with the land? And I think that the way that we think about the land, right, that we have since the market was even a little bit more crazy, was we weren't, for better or for worse, we weren't looking to drop a land asset token into some like speculative market where it gets traded as an asset and inflated so high that the people who actually wanted to play the game like couldn't afford it any longer, or that it like drops in price so far after like kind of the locusts come and feed that like by the time we launch the game it's some sort of major headwind. um, like we really want the game to be fun first and for people to play the game. And so and also the idea with this game really is that like the technology in terms of like low gas, the technology in terms of ease of use of wallets, the technology in terms of things like account abstraction, all kind of like come into play where we can bring in people who've never held crypto before to play the game and enjoy it and participate in the game economy. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that like we're trying to bring in people from outside crypto to play and love the game, and that like the game development hasn't slowed down, even though we've kind of delayed the land sale. Um, and really, like, if we, it's always been the goal that when you buy the land, you could at least play on it a little bit, right? We wanted it to be that like you buy the land, you can at the very least, as single player, you should be able to like walk around your land, and ideally it's multiplayer. And then there's like all the features on the rest of the game that we wanted to build on top, right? So being able to go and gather resources, being able to craft those resources, being able to like actually build buildings on your land, and then be able to build infrastructure like Harvard, like just the whole economy, right? And all those things just like take time to build out. And we just wanted to make sure that like as much of that was built as possible. So in the beginning, it was like, well, we'll launch the land sale in, you know, whatever, this past summer, and you'll just be able to like walk around. That's like done, right? Like we've played internally as a team, like we've played the game where you can like walk around and you can harvest some basic resources, and like we could have done that already. Um, but like really an ideal situation is less that like we're doing some giant pre-sale, and more that just like there are just thousands, tens of thousands of users playing the game who are like begging us to drop the land sale, right? Um, and so I think that's kind of like the market condition. Well, people still are buying video game in-game items regardless of crypto. They don't even really care, right? Like if you're not in crypto, you don't even notice what happened today. And so I think it's less about like waiting for perfect economic conditions and like trying to like get people to play the game. And then once that's like clearly happening, then we'll do it.
Yeah, I want to say like I'm like I obviously take part in the dev channels, kind of like look at what they're showing off. I try to give like some like bi-weekly or weekly updates every now and then, just some small stuff that's not maybe like too spoiler heavy or anything, but like I'll show like some monster designs that they're working on and stuff. They're constantly coming out with new stuff. The world is so huge, so there's like so many places that they're like populating up. I see that there's so many like building structures and stuff for like the architecture that they're making for all these different cities that are going to populate in the universe. So just there's a lot that they're building, and definitely like the game plan is we want to make sure that it's people when you guys first get to like really sit down and play it, it's an experience that you'll be able to like actually like, have fun with, rather than just kind of like be like less of like a tech demo and more like something that's like you'll casually be able to jump in and do some of the basic game loops, and kind of experience like the core of what the game is going to eventually evolve into as more features start dropping in. So I think that's first and foremost. Make sure that it's fun. Make sure that everyone knows exactly what they're getting into, and like when they jump in, I think if we started off with just kind of like having like a blank world that you kind of like walk around in and don't do anything in there, especially if we invite like other people from outside of the project or outside of crypto to do it, they may kind of like come in, play around a bit, be like, okay, that's fun, and then maybe like forget about it for like a few months or whatever, and then they have to kind of like be tapped on the shoulder to come back. I think it's better to have experience that they jump in there and they're able to really experience a lot of fun things, so that way it sticks in their mind a bit better when more features drop.
And
Yeah,
I
I don't really want like the land to just all be bought up by people who just like want the asset to appreciate from other people playing the game. It's like the game should be owned by people who are playing it.
Yeah, and I can jump in here a little bit too, because I'm having tons of discussions, and the team hears from me all the time. I have very passionate expectations for like what's being built out, right? So I'm in constant conversation with the Bisonic team, and one of the things that recently seen was like the Battler, right? And I'm really interested in the battler because I find it to be the heart of like some great MMOs, and diving into just like the ideology of like how do we create something great that everyone's going to like love and experience and enjoy, right? And I think that's always on my mind, and it's been in a lot of conversations, is like, well, fun is subjective, but also there's a ton of like categories of gamers that like you can approach if you've done correctly, right? So one of the things that comes up a lot is like the three loops that we're all pointing at, which is like crafting, battler, and the house, like we'll call it housing, right? And like those three things hit a lot of like subcategories of gamers. And in context, like I think the best games in the world do something really great, which is they give you a loop, at least one loop that's 5 minutes to learn, a lifetime to master, and you feel like you're really experiencing something in the hopefully thousands of hours that you're putting into that game that's enjoyable too. I could point to a lot of greats. There's like a ton of references I have in my head, but something to be said about the fact that I talked to Bisonic and we have like a lot of the same references, and trying to bring things in that were like exceptionally good within Web 2 that can be improved on in Web 3. And I always go back to the battler. I have like 3 docs at this point. The team probably hates me like discussing it all the time because I think it's so it should be involved. There should be depth. It should be fun. There should be communication between teammates. There's a lot of things that go into something that you're going to be putting a lot of time into. Because end of the day, you're going back to like battle to get crafting stuff. You're battling to get stuff for your house. You're battling to battle big monsters. Like this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest things of MMOs traditionally is the battler, right? So we've had like a ton of great conversations on what that progress is going to be and what it like ideology of the battler is going to be. Like I can't like spoil stuff here, but I can confidently say that it's going to be something really special and something that's going to be unique when executed, and that it'll be fun to play from the first time you play it to the last time you play it. And it should be engaging, and you get to kind of pick your difficulty with that. I think MMOs do a really good job of that in general, but it's really important for people to enter the game, have fun, and see the progression happening in real time with that battler in my mind. And now I'm just ranting, but I mean, I tend to do this when it comes to games, but I'm really excited for people to experience that and kind of like grab onto it and be a part of what we're making, right? And then hopefully spend a lot of their time playing this game.
Yeah, Jitsi, do you want to chat a little bit about like your thoughts on like the battler and the sort of battlers that you like, and maybe some of the conversations we've had?
Yeah, sure. To go like in depth with it, I think I'm always trying to point to a couple things, and I hold Elden Ring's like a really good example in modern gaming that I think did a wonderful job of letting someone pick the difficulty of which they approach the game. And I think this can be implemented within a battler as well. And the battler, in my mind, if you do it right, has a combination of like teamwork across the party when you're trying to play against the people in the PvP. The PvE is fun and entertaining, but also scales with you as you progress throughout the game. And that loop itself is really rewarding in a sense of you can feel like your decisions matter, right? Like I say this to the team, that's probably the one thing that I try to push the most is decisions matter within games. And if you feel like you can beat the game instantly, it doesn't feel like there's much happening. So like having a complexity and depth to it is like really important, right? Like I always think of card games a lot of the time. So you have like your MTG versus Hearthstone. Like what MTG does really well is it forces you to decisions, and then you are able to interact with other people's decisions in real time too. Versus Hearthstone, which is you take one of your turns, and the other person takes their turn. I find MTG to be more convincing and something that people will play over time, and it's been proven because MTG is like one of the best TCGs ever made. So how do you do that within like a turn-based battler or or an MMO or anything that's turn-based in general? Well, you implement an action bar. And so when Bisonic said that, I got really, really excited because you can only point to a couple things or a couple games that have tackled this, and they've kind of pivoted to go like back to turn-based, but I just don't think they've ever approached it correctly. A good example is, what's their name? Oh gosh, I can't remember. It's not Divinity. It's like the other game that's close to Divinity. It's turn-based or action. I can't recall. Hopefully someone can save me and post it in in our Discord. But
Sorry, I don't know.
yeah, it's all right. Pathfinder, there it is. So the cool thing with an action bar, if used correctly, and you have like a depth of skill and ability that like interacts with this action bar, is you can start creating like really cool like time-sensitive communication loops that you're required to use to beat systems. And I think that's super exciting. And I've talked to the team about this, and they're on the same page. Where like whatever you're fighting, your other team or a boss or a unique monster, like figuring out how to beat them when they affect with what you're doing in real time becomes super difficult, or at least you can scale it correctly, right? So from the very first time when you decide to fight crabs at level 1 versus the monster at 50, each one of those fights feels like you can mess up in any instance, and it's really rewarding if you like play your way through it. And now we're going back to me ranting, but those are just like some of the things I'm looking at and talking with Bisonic, and they're on the same page. Like they agree, and they've referenced stuff that I reference as well. But it's important to get people invested early and have it be rewarding as you go. I think that if there's one thing I had to point to, it's that, right? Like the incentive structure of progression within a game is important.
One of the interesting comments I'm seeing in Discord is maybe like a bit of disappointment in delaying the land sale to be coordinated with the game launch. I feel like I might actually be missing something because I don't quite understand the thought there. So yeah, so if anyone wants to kind of like fill me in on the on that feeling, yeah, feel free to come up and explain it, because I think, from my perspective, well, yeah, it's fun to be able to like have the game like working when we sell those. But yeah, happy to hear kind of everyone's thoughts. I mean, I think everything is still pretty flexible at this phase. Warder, what's up? All right, great. Bring you up and you can we can chat. Hi. Oh, I muted everyone. What happened here? Okay, there we go. Sorry. Try now.
What's up, Warner?
What's up?
Hey, so maybe I need to ask a clarifying question. Can you hear me all right?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So what I heard was maybe game launches, then land sale launches. Is that correct?
I think that's,
It's an
it's hard to
option.
define like launch, for example, right? Like what does it mean to like launch, right? So like where you have like the full economy on, and like there, no take backs, all crypto based. So I don't think that it's like necessarily clear that like the land sale is guaranteed to be like months after launch, because I think that like owning land and crafting on it is a key part. But I think it's more just like there'll probably be an early alpha economy before the land sale. I don't know if that makes sense.
Maybe.
And I also think it's a bit fluid too. I think
It's for sure fluid. Yeah.
it's definitely fluid. And yeah, I think there's multiple phases to a launch for any game that is successful, and from beta to alpha and stuff in between. So, I think we just want to we want the incentive to be game first, and also we have to time the market a bit, and so it's just a bit of a balancing act.
Sure. I think so I guess some of the responses have been sort of like, well, we don't want to corner the market for people, and then like have newcomers come in and not be able to play, which I totally understand. And, maybe there's a way of, I don't know, releasing the land in sort of waves where that can work. But I guess my concern is that like because the land is like a huge part of the gameplay itself, and um, so there's like battling, there's crafting, there's crafting plays a large part on the land plays a large part in the crafting, if I'm not mistaken, and if the land doesn't come out, and I obviously I understand there's like alpha beta, but like if the game launches and there's no land, that feels like then the game is like kind of half done, like we're releasing at 0.7 rather than 1.0. And I'm not entirely sure I understand why that would be the case. Like I understand like you don't want to corner the market, but like there's always going to be new people, and there's always going to be people who are late. So I'm not sure how we would prevent that at all. So like if game launches January 1 and land launches January 1, and then it takes off and people are really interested in it in March, well then the land's all gone anyway. I'm just not sure delaying the land like really prevents the thing that you're trying to prevent.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? It's like, so there's always somebody who's going to show up later. I can understand that. Well, so then I suppose it brings us back to your original question, which is something like, So if you can decouple sort of the land from whenever the game launches, then the question is like, what market conditions would you want to see? Um, and I think that like what we would want to see is, uh, well, like we wouldn't want to see what we have, today, which is just sort of like major exchanges collapsing, for example, right? Like I think we just want to see some sort of stability in the market. We'd basically just want to kind of have like expectations that that we have kind of like enough demand. And so I think that that is like somewhat fluid. Um, you know, I we probably should put together sort of like a dashboard of like metrics that we kind of expect to hit. We for certainly won't delay it indefinitely, but I think part of the problem with crypto is that it all just like moves so fast, right? Is that you can kind of like pick a date and then sort of, the morning of or the day before you kind of realize, um, well, it's like the worst choice to launch it on that date. So I think that like I don't have a better answer for you, which is just like, oh yeah, we're waiting for ETH to be at over 1,200 for 3 weeks, right? Like there's not like a specific thing like that. But I also feel like we can all feel pretty clearly that like today would not be a good day to mint like a land sale of that size. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's a real answer. It's mostly just like, yeah, we're just deciding. Oh yeah, go ahead, Mato.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think a good way to say it is kind of like we want to make sure that we strike like a nice balance where it's like there's enough demand where there's like a kind of steady flow. It's less about like trying to make sure that 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 there's always land like indefinitely available or like there's like land for like 3 months out or whatever, but more that there's like that it's not like swoop that like it's all gone in one day, and it's not like that there's land that's still out there like pretty much for like a year because nobody's really picking it up. Want to make sure that it's like the game is in a state where it's fun enough that people who are just playing, they'll just naturally just want to just pick up land, and then it'll just kind of like organically be able to like sell at a decent rate. And I think that there are macro conditions that kind of like are important to keep mind of, and also just making sure that the game is in a state where it just naturally progresses to that level where you feel like where we feel confident that like you get into the game, you play it, you go through the loops, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I think I want to pick up a land rather than I'll pick up a land just speculatively because this game, I think it may come out, even though I've barely played it. I think it may turn to something like what allowed land sales are now. More like, like it's easier to tell that you would enjoy playing this game later on.
And like crypto, like I would say that maybe 80%, like 20% of people who would buy right now would buy because they just like love the game and believe in the project, right? Like the Wizzies who are like listening in now. But I still think that crypto still has developed over this last year the habit of like if it doesn't sell out the first day, then the project is like going nowhere, right? So like when we launched Wizards, so whatever this was, a year and a half ago, the thing we always talk about is like Bored Apes took over a week to actually mint out. And that was fine at that time, right? Like there were projects that like kind of minted out slowly, and that was just sort of like well proven that that could work. I think over the past year, especially as like the bull market has been so crazy, that you basically see however it does on the first day sets the tone for the entire life of the project, right? If it doesn't mint out within like 24 hours, then basically everyone's just like, well, I'd rather place my bet somewhere else because things are popping off everywhere. And so I think that in the future we'll all look back on that as being a bit ridiculous, right? You don't like you don't walk into like the Lego store and like if they have sets on the shelf, you're like, oh, they have inventory, then like these sets must suck. Like that'd be ridiculous. Like when you go to the Lego store, you expect to be able to like find the sets that you want and buy them. And so like I think that particularly game assets will end up being like that where well, there's inventory available and the economy still functions. But I think that today, if we were to like, launch it into some crazy bear market, whatever, everybody understands this. I'm beating a dead horse, which is like, if you launch the land sale right now and you only sell 50%, then all of a sudden that's like a huge headwind, given the way that people think about like NFTs, like in this moment. But I think that mindset will change.
I also think that something to keep in mind is there are 70,000 plots in total in the game. And it sounds like we're going to just, we can play with how much land is sold at a time, and there may be waves, and then may be smaller or bigger, and we can play with those. We can tweak those knobs and play with the levers and decide how that looks and what the right timing is. So it's not just like one moment where all the land's for sale. But clearly, it's sort of a complex, um, not issue, but a complex problem that we need to sort of solve for and make sure it goes off properly. But we promise we are putting a ton of thought into it. And there's even some really great talk with the marketing team over at Bisonic on Warder, to your question on you know, data and analytics that can sort of shine a light on when we think might be a good time. So a lot of people way smarter than me helping sort of triangulate everything.
We've got some breaking news coming in with OpenSea just tweeting out something around enforcing creator fees. Maybe you all have read it because it looks actually now it's like 30 minutes ago. But.
Yeah, well, Cosmo's on stage. Cos, you shared it. You want to say something?
Well, I'm going to read it because I haven't read it yet. It says, "Update: We will continue to enforce creator fees on all existing collections." So that's good. When we began seeking guidance from our community, blah blah blah. One observation: people are trying to sell them for as much as they can. I don't know. Yeah, Cause you're up here. You read it. Why don't you summarize for us so I don't have to read the whole thing verbatim?
I actually haven't read the whole thing. I was in
Okay,
middle of
Cosmo
it
says
right
reading the
now.
whole thing is a good idea. Number 4, for collectors. For collectors, this means the NFTs they really want are increasingly likely to be listed on marketplaces that don't enforce creator fees. Even if those collectors say they want to pay creator fees, they're becoming more and more prone to buying on those marketplaces. 5, this isn't theoretical. It's happening now, and the trend is accelerating. Yes, and OpenSea is a bit nervous, right? Because the royalty-free marketplaces still take a marketplace fee. So OpenSea basically is losing that volume and that fee to competitive marketplaces because they enforce a fee when their competitors don't, right? So their competitors are stealing their revenue by not paying creators. Fine. How long is this thread? Okay, it's only 10-ish tweets, so we're on number 6. Simply put, in the last week, almost half of the creator fees set by the top 20 collections were ignored. This amounts to well over 1 million for creators left on the table. 7, unless something changes soon, the space is trending towards significantly fewer fees paid to creators. No policy that we implement will reverse that if this behavior continues. We're awed by the passion, blah de blah, creators. For existing collections, you should build towards on-chain enforcement and develop more incentives. So that's actually a really interesting idea. So let's talk on-chain enforcement. I don't know if anybody cares about this. I'm interested. Maybe I've beating a dead horse. Let me know in the Discord if you don't care. Basically, one of the things that OpenSea says is that you should basically deny list certain contracts, and what they basically are saying is like join together or die, right? Like you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours, which is block all of our competitors that aren't charging these fees, and then we'll protect you by enforcing your fees. I think that like I can understand it. I think that's a deal that's like reasonable to take if you like had to launch a collection right now, fine. But I think that like it's not actually a good long-term strategy because actually the gas to kind of like have a new intermediate contract that isn't on kind of that deny list is actually quite cheap and not that hard to do. And so I just don't see it being like kind of a long-term solution. It's really a short-term solution. You see, I know that like QQL has had some success there, and it's like it probably is fine for like the next month. But literally, I think we'll see by the end of Q1 next year, you'll see like a no-fee exchange that basically has invented a contract that you can't block by like a single address. So then Bored Apes basically published a blog post, and Bored Apes said, instead of making a list of contracts that can't hold your NFTs or that can't use them, you should instead do allow listing, which means no contracts on the Ethereum network can hold your NFTs other than the ones that like we manually approve. Honestly, I think that's worse. I think that's terrible because what it basically means is that like And even they put in the blog post, they're like, oh well, we would have to like allow list all of the Gnosis safe, which is like a multi-sig wallet. And that's part of the problem, is that like nobody, part of the like important part of like the freedom to own these digital objects is like the freedom to compose them within all sorts of like smart contracts. So not only like liquidity providers like NFTX or SudoSwap, but also like smart contract wallets like Gnosis Safe, or like millions of other ones, or anything new that might be invented tomorrow. And like just imagine how awful it would be if like someone invented a new better NFT wallet, and you don't have a lot of adoption yet because it's fresh, and now you have to like go petition the ape DAO or whatever to for anybody's NFTs to be able to be held by that wallet. It'll just like kill any sort of like innovation and usability on the space. I just don't, I think that it's worse. um well, so I think that there's an open question, which is like, what is actually the solution? And I don't think that anyone really kind of has an on-chain solution yet. I don't know. Yeah. Hi, Orbis. Yeah, raising your hand. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Yeah.
I don't have a solution, but I mean, I have more fuel for the conversation, like regarding this, because like I just think about it in like regards to my books that I write, right? Like, so I have a product that I have to print, right? It's not digital. I have to print it, and I sell it on like a marketplace like Amazon. And of course, like obviously, like I'd be dead if I didn't get a fee from selling it on Amazon. So that's like a must. But then you have people that have bought it on Amazon and then they want to resell it. And so they go to somewhere like eBay or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I don't need a piece of that because they already bought it from me. But then I don't know. These are thoughts that just crossing my mind. I don't know how it applies to like digital goods, but like, that's why I'm just saying, like, I see a place for both kinds. We can't just like block out no creator marketplaces, because there's a place for those kinds of trades. Like I use those, but I still support creator fees at the same time. So it's like I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, like, there's so many things that are valid and that should exist. So I don't know the solution, but anyway, it's just adding to the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the like decentralized freedom to own these assets should be the freedom to kind of transact however you want to, right? Like if I want to like do an over the counter trade where you pay me money and then I send you the NFT, like that should totally be allowed. I feel like that's part of kind of um, the permissionless nature of the system. So yeah, I don't think that it's really about like incentive systems, like crafting incentive systems that make sense. Right. Like you said, if I buy a book and then I sell it secondhand, I don't get any royalty on that book. Um, I think that like how NFTs in terms of like PFPs maybe differ, or maybe not actually. Um, so for example, one of the things that you see with, let's say, like textbooks is that like what happens is the textbook authors actually publish like an update, right? Revision 4, revision 5, revision 6. Why? It's not really because always that these things change every year, but it's sort of like almost like this like subscription, or sort of this information as a service, right? Like um, part of the reason why textbooks are so expensive and why teachers kind of require you to buy the new one each year is it's basically like subscription revenue, right? And so I think that like you do see that mechanic a little bit. And the problem is that like books, like biology textbooks, aren't like collectibles. And so you have this dynamic where um, well, I have to be careful. So I'm going to talk about NFTs in general and not Forgotten Runes specifically, right? So let's talk about like some other project where people think about the tokens as like purely financial. So in other projects, you basically expect that you buy this NFT as an asset, and that it appreciates in value, and that you can eventually sell it to someone else for more. Um, and well, you also expect those teams to like work on behalf of the holders in order to like make that IP more valuable. Let's take like Cool Cats, for example, right? So like they don't have quite a lot of like grassroots sort of storytelling creation like we do, and you sort of, or like Moonbirds. I actually saw this quite a lot when I was in like the Moonbird Discord. Is that there's a lot of hopes kind of hung on Kevin Rose to sort of like build the brand, right? And so we sort of expect like Kevin Rose, you need to save us. Kevin Rose, you need to make my Moonbird asset more worth more money in the future. And so like under a paradigm where it's not like a book where you expect the creator to make ongoing efforts to make your book more valuable. You basically have this asset and you expect the creator to make ongoing efforts to like make your Moonbird more valuable. And under a model where the creator kind of makes more money because on the royalties, that makes total sense, right? Because if the price of the Moonbird goes up, and then like and as they're traded, you make more money on the trades. And so to me that feels like just such a good alignment if that's your expectation. If your expectation is like, oh, I want the team to build these things to make it more valuable for me to be a part of this like sort of organization. And when you remove royalties, that makes that whole conversation a lot more difficult. I think it makes the whole like industry a bit more like challenging insofar as, well, you'll get creators who launch without any expectation of kind of um, making the project better over time because there's no like straightforward incentive. Like, of course, people will create like really sophisticated tokenomics, like people who can, right? And I think that in our case, we have the ability to create like smart contracts that are as sophisticated as we need to. We have the ability to sort of like make money from the game and the show and the comic, and so like I think we're a lot better off. But where you have these projects where you can just launch something and then make money off royalties in like a very simple way, I think we'll see fewer of those.
I also think, just to bring it back, I think it was the right decision that OpenSea did that. And there was a lot of back channeling between projects. I was talking to a lot of other founders of you know large communities, and I think it was a really cool thing to see us come together and be very clear about where we stood about it. And so I'm personally very happy. I spent a bit of time on this over the past week or so. So I'm happy, and I think it was the right thing. So thanks, OpenSea.
Yeah. I think then they kind of reiterated on in this post. I think that their intent wasn't like, I don't think they specifically wanted to really play the game of zero royalties, but it almost felt like they were forced into the corner where like their opponents were playing that move. And like they reiterated in that speech as well, like pretty much like the trend is moving towards that, and like those other marketplaces are taking fees as well, and they're pretty much going to just sit back and watch as their trade volume and users go to those other migrate to other marketplaces organically if they don't do something about it, right? So I feel like it's kind of like it was almost like a business move on their part. And I feel like the tool that they made, where that knee jerk reaction of like, we want to like ban other marketplaces so that way we can enforce royalties for you, because there's no way for them to enforce royalties on other marketplaces. But the best they can do is say like, hey, if we're going to enforce royalties for you, just like try to make sure that you have our back as well, because otherwise everybody would just go to other marketplaces. It doesn't matter if we enforce royalties for you because people are just going to trade on other marketplaces. So even if we say go ahead, I think that's what they want to avoid. And I think that's still they want to keep that royalty system, but I think what they're trying to do more is just kind of like create conversation more about it and like show that like, look, this is an ongoing problem and it's going to like, it seems like it's going to evolve unless like something's going to like stop and like create this conversation, because it didn't start at OpenSea, and I don't think they wanted to end that OpenSea either, where like they just start off royalties and then
I think they're trying to make a call on
right
the playing field, and the playing field is going to evolve, right? And so it's
exactly.
this game of chicken where it's like, okay, we're losing market share, we need to do the same thing as them, but it's more complex as that, because it's more complex than that.
I
right?
feel
I think
yeah, no, I feel like because I feel like there's a lot of like kind of like I understand why there was a lot of like negative reaction towards OpenSea, but it almost made it seem as if like OpenSea was doing the decision like entirely, like they're the one who started the whole zero royalty thing. But I feel like they were actually I was expecting them to have done that long ago, but the fact that they even gave like a month's heads up, like, hey, we plan on doing this in a month. I feel like they just really want an open discussion. I feel like they're getting that now. I feel like we'll get more conversation about what we want, and if the industry does trend towards zero royalties, I'm sure that there will be new create incentives that are made. But I feel like the current models that we have, like maybe we did get too used to the current models that we have. Maybe the models that we have where we have royalties indefinitely. Maybe it's easier to work with, but perhaps there's like more complicated ones and nuanced ones that we can create that also could help fill that gap without taking from every sale. But I guess that's something we'll have to experiment. And I feel like in that extensive experimentation, we're going to see like a lot of projects that may try it. I think Art Gobbler is probably like a good example of that. They tried something completely new with their tokenomics and such. And I feel like that game, like it kind of burnt out really fast. But I feel like we're probably going to see, like, if there's no incentives, like it will be something like that where it's like you can build something out and then like find a different way to kind of like accrue that kind of like tokenomic or value within your project and get some additional revenue.
I totally agree. Yeah. Art Gobblers, for kind of all of the like crash and burn, is just like an incredibly intricate, clever, like well-designed system. And there's a lot of pieces there that like can be reused. And
Exactly. I feel as if it's a great experiment, and I feel like a lot of smart people are like looking at it and they're trying to pick apart. They're like dissecting like kind of like what happened with it and how can we prevent it from burning out so fast and how do we utilize the best aspect of it, because there's a lot that's going on in it.
It's basically like Algo Stables. Honestly, that's what I felt like. I was playing like DSD again.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people were saying in the beginning it's kind of like its own with an NFT attached to it. And part of it, there's like 3 different games that are being played simultaneously. So
cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, and with OpenSea too, like that's basically their announcement is really just for Legacy Collection. They basically are still moving to like optional royalties unless you kind of use their code snippet, which I think I mean, it's not awful, but well, it's just interesting to see this new world. And yeah, I feel the same as you, Matto, which is like I'm just really excited to see the new mechanics that people come up with, because that's like one of my favorite things about crypto. Well,
I have one last question before we get off, if I can.
Please.
Yeah.
The shark emoji. Is that like is that like one of the familiars or something that didn't get genned and then you just got decided, hey, we gotta use it somehow. You threw it into Discord. I love the emoji, but I have no clue where it came from.
So yeah, basically, I don't mind. We'll share a little bit of the secret sauce. So we usually don't share kind of the mistakes so openly, but Elf's not here today, so it was my mistake anyway, which is the shark was designed to be a companion in the Warriors collection, super rare one, and I think that it was mythic, and which means there's like only going to be 8. And well, the way the gens basically work is, of course, only certain traits can belong with other traits, right? So the most obvious ones being like gender and skin color. And so, like, obviously, you don't want those things to be mixed up in a way that doesn't make sense. And so the shark actually was tied into having a trait for basically like pirate affinity, essentially, like having like the ocean, the sea, pirate affinity, and it was mislabeled in such a way that it would only be genned if every other trait had pirate affinity. So if it was a 5 of 5, and coincidentally,
you coded out the shark. No.
Yeah. Coincidentally, there was no 5 of 5 pirate affinity that satisfied the shark constraint, and we didn't notice until after the gen was finalized. And so so it's basically kind of a missing companion that I was like, I love this. We're putting it in Discord. So maybe it will find its way into something else in the future. But yeah, that's the story of the shark.
I'm gonna go on record. I'm gonna go on record and say that I was not ready to put a shark out there. It just doesn't make any sense. Land sharks.
He's a land shark. Come on, he could be on the land.
Okay,
Come
land
on.
shark, but
You
like
can
give
you can have
me.
bear snake, but you can't have a land shark. Come on. Come on.
Listen, bears and snakes breathe air, my friend. If we're gonna do a land shark, I want to see some of those like little like mid-evolution little peg arms that they can like walk around on, like the mudfish. So I was fine with it. I may or may not have deleted some code to make that happen. So sorry.
In the end, the
Now we
universe
have
fucked,
the true
right?
culprit.
Well, this has been Dotta, and this has been Wizard Wednesday,
And land shark.
and Land Sharks, and we are channeling out from the Quantum Downs with Bear Snake, Matazuki, Jitsi, Cosmo, Warder, Orbis, Tanya Del Rio, Fox Wizard, Juan Snow, GN, everybody.